Hello, today we're going to talk about the need for evaluations. I think there is some confusion as to one, what is considered to be an evaluation? Two, why is it needed? What's the purpose and how does it help my child? So today that's what we're going to talk about in a nutshell. I'm hoping that it generates more questions. Um, I'm hoping that it explains a lot too. This is, the layman's version of how evaluations are done and why they're needed. And some of the um, statements districts make when parents request these evaluations. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And what I want you to do is I'm going to tell you when to hit enter and it'll take you to the next screen. Okay? So hit enter. Hit enter again. Okay. My name is Tammy Joya and I'm a special needs advocate. So I just want to give you a little background about IDEA. I don't know if you guys know this, but IDEA was created specifically to protect children with disabilities from the very agency that is supposed to, or entity that is supposed to educate them. So 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, your child goes to public school. And so they're supposed to educate them. But they weren't. So a lot of children children with special needs were either not going to school, were being refused an education from the public schools, or they were going and they weren't getting an education. Um, so Congress created IDEA, and it's evolved over the years, but for the most part, this is what we have right now, and it's pretty comprehensive, and it's written in a way that anybody can understand it. It's not legalese. It's not written, in Latin. If you can read and comprehend, you can understand how these laws are written and how they protect your child to ensure that your child with a disability receives an education. Um, what I found is that, and what I continue to find, is that public schools and these state agencies, they have their own agenda um, as far as how the rules are supposed to be implemented, how they interpret the law, which is all to their benefit, of course. But for today's issue, it has to do with assessing your child, because in order to receive special education services, there are steps that have to be done, and one of them is the evaluation procedures. So one of the responsibilities of the school district is to evaluate your child in all areas of suspected disability. Um, and if they don't, it could be considered a violation, and it could be considered a denial of FAPE if they didn't. Because if they didn't evaluate your child in all areas of suspected disability, and your child is in the area that they didn't evaluate seems to be regressing further and further and further, then you could prove that because they didn't evaluate here, and then you go and get it done yourself, and you can prove that all this time my child has had this issue and the school district just ignored it, and it was their fault because they never evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. From the time you found and you got your own evaluation done all the way back to either 1 year in a state complaint, that's all you get is 1 year right now, or 2 years in a hearing, you can go all the way back depending on which avenue you choose to exercise your rights. And you can go back that far for 2 years for that particular service. Let's say it's speech and language. So you can get speech and language services that go all the way back for 2 years. So let's say it's 2 times 30 your kid should have got speech and language for the last year. And then you find out. So in addition to the 2 times 30 that your child should have got, that he never did. So you get that now. Plus you get the 2 times 30 right now. So in essence, your child would be getting 4 times 30 for speech and language because of the compensatory, because of the denial of FAPE. So that's why they have to prevent that from happening. Okay? The evaluations determine if your child is even eligible for special education services. It determines if your child is eligible. There's a criteria that has to be met. But if your child is eligible, that determines, the evaluations determine the type of services, the frequency and duration of those services, the goals and objectives that go into the IEP, so that your child can meet the goals and objectives to overcome whatever the issue is for which the IEP was written. And all of this, it comes from the evaluations. Now, evaluations are also supposed to be, the instruments that they use to do the evaluations are supposed to be valid and reliable, technically sound. You cannot make a determination of eligibility or a determination of ineligibility based on a screening, such as like the DIBELS or the DRA2 or whatever screening tool they're using to use RTI or any other kind of program that they're attempting to replace IDEA with. Okay? If they're using any instrument that they cannot prove is valid and reliable, technically sound instrument, that's other anything more than a screening. If it's a screening and they did it, it's against the law. They can't determine eligibility or ineligibility using a screening. So you have to know what the difference is, and you have to ask them, is this a screening? If they say DRA2, I'm telling you it's a screening. If they say the DIBELS, I'm telling you that's a screening. And here's the thing. If you can't use a screening tool to determine eligibility, and you've determined that the child needs eligibility using a screening, you certainly can't use that same screening. You still can't use that screening to write the objectives if it's against the law to use it to determine eligibility in the first place. You can't then take DIBELS and put it in the IEP and derive objectives and goals based on that screening instrument that determined eligibility in the first place, which was illegal. There's a reason why it's called a screening. They're supposed to identify, locate, and evaluate your child. That's called child find. And if they don't do all of it, and what they're doing, using RTI, for instance, is they're identifying your kid, they're locating your kid, and then they're using some screening tool to determine if your child's at risk or not. Okay, at risk of a what? Failing? Is it long term? Is it short term? What is it? I mean, they're not, that screening tool isn't good for you. So, and the screening tool that they're using usually is for a very concentrated area of reading. In most cases, it's all about reading and like math, because math has a lot of reading in it. So it doesn't delve into like reading comprehension, for instance. It's nice to read, but I've had 4-year-old autistic kids that could read my necklace that said my name scripted on a medallion. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't know if that was my name. He didn't know what it was. He could read War and Peace. He was 4 years old, but it was called hypolexic or hyperlexic. He could read anything. He just couldn't comprehend anything. So reading and reading comprehension go hand in hand. That's why a lot of these instruments that they're using right now do not evaluate in all areas of suspected disability. Therefore, they're a screening. That's another thing. They're just a screening tool to determine if your child may need to be evaluated further. But all that does is just delay. Denial and delay go hand in hand. It's just a way to delay the inevitable. They're going to have to do an evaluation using valid and reliable, technically sound instruments. The best thing they could do is just do it right that first time, right off the rip, and get it all done. But they don't. So this is why you have to tell them you want your child evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. If a school district used the DRA2 or the DIBELS or any screening, and they determine that your child's at risk, that's a red flag. You need your child evaluated using valid and reliable, technically sound instruments. Now, put it in writing and give it to the school. So that's what IDEA is about. That's how it protects your kid, because without these regulations, you wouldn't have anything. There are options you have. When they don't do what I just said, they have to do. Okay? Please hit enter. Okay, so there's 3 steps you have to remember. If you want your child evaluated, make the request in writing. Date it and sign it and keep a copy for your records and give it to the school. Don't give it to the principal. Give it to the SPED director in your school. I don't care how many different levels they have, CSEs and all these different things that they do in school districts. Find out who is the head of your special ed department and send it to that person. Okay? Keep a copy of the record. Okay? Keep a copy of it. Because once you make that in writing, they got 60 days. I don't care what they say, they got 60 days. The district has to respond to your request in writing. And the district, in their response, they only have 2 options. Approve it or refuse it. So if you ask for your child to be evaluated in all areas of suspected disability, they only have two choices, and they have to put it in writing. They either send you the consent to do the evaluations where they list all the areas they're going to evaluate, or they send you a refusal letter. Okay? They only have two options. Please hit enter. Like I said, approval in writing. And if they approve it, they send you a consent form, and they got 60 days to complete the assessments. 60 days to have the written report in your hand. If you ask for an assessment, ask that you get a copy of the evaluations, all of them, 48 hours before the team meeting. You need to have the same opportunity that the school district does to review what they wrote so that you can set up your questions. See, they don't want you to set up your questions. They don't want you asking questions about their evaluation, but you need to. You need to ask questions. If you have questions, the only way you're going to be able to remember the questions is to get the document 48 hours and prepare for that meeting. And that's how you prepare for it. Ask for the evaluations 48 hours before the team meeting. And if they don't give it to you, go get their evals on that day and then cancel the meeting because you didn't have a chance to review and reschedule it and put it in writing and tell them why you canceled it and you need to reschedule because they didn't comply with your request and the regulations. Now, if they refuse you, they have to put it in writing too. And they have to tell you why. And if you're asking for an independent evaluation, then they also have to file for a hearing. They have to file for a hearing to say that their evaluations were comprehensive and therefore you don't need an independent evaluation. Okay? Please hit enter. Here's the law about them putting it in writing. It's actually called prior written notice. Prior written notice says if the district or you, a parent, is proposing to initiate or change the identification, you want an evaluation, or the educational placement of the child, or the provision of FAPE, they have to put it in writing. So if you don't have to put it in writing, but the district does. Okay? If the district is proposing to change your child's identification, like change your child from an IEP to a 504, they have to put it in writing. And they have to let you know what they're doing and why they want to do it. Okay? Now, in order for them to change your child from an IEP to a 504 or to just eliminate special education at all, they have to do the same thing they did to get your kid on an IEP or a 504. They have to evaluate using valid and reliable, technically sound instruments. So along with that proposal, they got to send you a consent to evaluate, which they don't because they know you don't know. So they won't do it. But that's what they're supposed to do. Now, if you ask for those same things, you're proposing to initiate an evaluation. Okay, let's say it's an evaluation. Or you're requesting a different placement for your child. You want your child from a regular ed classroom to a significantly separate classroom. Or you want your child to go from a significantly separate program to a private school, special needs school. Okay, I don't know. Some states, they don't even have private special needs schools. But for those who do, like Massachusetts, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, this is how you do it. It has to be in writing. Okay, you send it to the school. So the school has to respond to you. Now, if they refuse your request to, let's say, evaluate, they have to put it in writing. And they have to tell you why they're saying no. They don't get to just say no to you verbally. They must put it in writing. See what it says in number A? At the top, it says A. It says must be given to the parents of a child with a disability. Written notice that meets the requirements must be given to the parents of a child with a disability. A reasonable time before the public agency proposes to initiate a change or refuses to initiate a change, blah, 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 blah. They have to give you prior written notice. Prior written notice is a written document. Okay? If they refuse, they got to do. The content of the notice must include 1 through 7. Must. Has to be in your native language. That's another thing. Florida was a biggie. They didn't put anything in Spanish. 50% of the population in Florida is Spanish. And they didn't even put the notices in Spanish. They put pieces of documents in Spanish. And then they told me that they don't have to do that. That's not how they do it. It's against the law. It's against the law. Anyway, this is what the entire law talks about, prior written notice. That's what it must contain. So if you go to the school and they say to you, well, we got to have a meeting, that's a lie. They don't got to have a meeting. Absolutely not. If you follow that link, you can print it out yourself, copy and paste it, and give it to them and say, no, you say 34 CFR 300.503. There's nothing, not one word about the school district must have a team meeting to discuss the parent's request. Nope, not so much. It's not in there. So you tell them no. And every day, that's just a delay tactic because they don't want to do the evaluations because they already know that your child needs more services and supports than they're getting. They already know that. Believe me. They don't care. That's why they're telling you we have to meet. It's a way to discourage you from getting the evaluations done. They're going to explain away why they don't have to do it. And all you do, if you feel that you have to go to the meeting, you just go there and you listen. Don't say a word. Just listen to all of their reasons, explanations, or excuses. And when they get done, you say, are you done? And they'll say, yes. That's nice. I want it in writing. Everything you just said to me, put it in writing. That you're refusing. For whatever reason you just said, just put it in writing. The law says you have to put it in writing. And if you don't, I will. This whole conversation we just had, I'm going back home. I'm going to put it in writing. And I'm going to send it to you. And then I'm going to exercise my due process rights. Now, where are my procedural safeguards? Because just because you guys said no doesn't mean it's over. It just means I got to take the next step. And I'm good. I'll take the next step. The next step is to file for a complaint against them for violating your rights. You got to get it in writing. If you don't get it in writing, it's evidence. If you get it in writing, it's still evidence because they're always going to make up reasons, explanations, or excuses why it's okay for them to break the law. And it's just not okay. They're lying. I have proven it over and over again. They lie. They lie when telling the truth would be better, I'm telling you. Please hit enter. All areas of suspected disability. This is all areas of suspected disability. There might be even more than this. But off the top of my head, this is what they have to do. When you go to them and you tell them you want your kid evaluated, you use the phrase, I want my child evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. And they're going to say, what do you mean? I want a psychological done that includes social, emotional, behavioral, academic, and IQ testing. That means all academic areas. Then I want related services because I think my kid has a problem with writing. He has fine motor skills problems. He can't put pen to paper. He can't snap his shirt. He can't button his pants. He can't tie his shoes. He can't, and then PT. Can't ride a bike and he's 15. Has no coordination at all. He has no strength in his upper body. That's all you have to, things like that. That's all you have to say. You don't even have to give them a reason. Just tell them those are the areas you want your kid tested. If they don't like it, you tell them you have two options. Approve it or refuse it. Just say which one you don't want to do. And then tell me what you use to say your opinion is better than mine. Because your opinion is not, because I will go get this done. And then when I get it done, I'm going to get you for denial of FAPE. And I'm going to go back 2 years. Or I'm going to go back a year for compensatory services. So you tell them all of the areas that you believe your child should be evaluated in. All areas of suspected disability. This is what it encompasses. This is just off the top of my head. So if your child's having behaviors, inappropriate behaviors, and inappropriate behaviors can look like anything. I mean, it's just, all you have to do is say, what is an appropriate behavior for my child at this age? Throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get away, that's a typical toddler thing to do. From toddlers to first grade. How bad, how intense are the temper tantrums? How long do they last? Why is he having a temper tantrum? Is he having a temper tantrum because you told him to do something and they don't want to do it? Is he having a temper tantrum because he's avoiding to do some work in the classroom? Is he having a temper tantrum because he has a psychological problem? Does he do it all the time for absolutely no reason and you don't see it coming? Okay, those are inappropriate behaviors. So you're going to want an FBA. Is your child verbally or physically aggressive, throwing furniture at school, at teachers and stuff, hitting people? constantly getting into fights, yeah, you're going to want a functional behavioral assessment, and you're going to want the corresponding behavior plan. The functional behavioral assessment has to include observations. It has to include data collection, that they actually took data and wrote it down, what they saw, when they saw it, who was there when it happened, how long did it take place, what happened just before the behavior was exhibited. See, that's called data collection. That's what a board certified behaviorist would do. Then you have to collect it in various settings. Because if your child is in a classroom, then there are certain restrictions. There's certain conditions upon which your child operates in that room. That he knows that there's certain things he can and cannot do. He just knows that. After a while, they just understand. Then, of course, and he still acts up even though he knows. But then, even that behavior changes from setting to setting. Because, at least in the classroom, there's more structure in the classroom than there is, let's say, at recess or in the lunchroom. So you're going to see different behaviors, and you're going to see different things being exhibited if there's a problem with your child's behavior, that you believe there's a problem. Now, if there are problems, sometimes it could stem from the fact that your child's failing academically. It could be of cognitive delays. It could be that your child has a speech and language impairment. I mean, it could be for any kind of reasons that you could have a behavior problem. So you're going to want to ask yourself these questions. The best way to do it is to just tell them, I want my child evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. And I believe all of these areas, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, academically. I need an IQ test. I need related services. I need all of that. And they know what you're talking about. And they'll say no. You tell them to put it in writing. Everything I just asked for that I want, that you're saying no to, make sure you put that in writing. And you cite the regulations. Prior written notice says if you're refusing it, you have to put it in writing and tell me why. Okay? Hit the enter key. You want to be as specific in your request to evaluate as possible. Please hit the enter key again. List all areas you want evaluated, just like on the previous screen. If you just want to list that, that's good. Just use that screen. Print out that screen and use that. Just copy it down. You want to make sure that when you make your request, you want to date it, sign it, and keep a copy for your records. They only have 60 days to finish the evaluations. They only have a few days to answer your request if they're going to refuse it. And like I said, remember, they only have 60 days to get it in your hand. Make sure when you make your request in writing that you tell them you want 48 hours, you want a copy. You want copies of the evaluations 48 hours before the team meeting. Make sure you include that statement. Please hit enter twice. Putting it in writing is called creating the paper trail. Please hit the enter key again. This does three things. Protects you. Because if you're trying to prove that they denied FAPE, you're going to need protection. You're going to need documents to support your allegations. Okay? It clarifies exactly what you told the school district, what you wanted them to do. And you're telling them, this is what I want you to do. And then it provides, now it's provided you with evidence to use against them if they don't do what they're supposed to do. Creating the paper trail is the most important thing you will ever do when it comes to your kid. You got to keep these papers. You got to keep them in order, and you have to always put everything in writing. Don't just pick up the phone. It's easy to pick up the phone and talk to them. An email is a wonderful thing. The E in email stands for evidence. I heard that from a lawyer on TV, and it's wonderful. It's true. The E in email is evidence. If you want to send an email, fine. Click and drag documents, cool. Do that. You have a paper trail. Create a folder on your email that's just for you talking to the school with your kid. If you have to create one for each kid, if you have more than one kid, create a folder for each one of your kids. And all you have to do is save that document, that email, in that folder. Okay? That's what you need to do. Protection, clarification, evidence. You're going to need all of that. Oh, please hit enter. And then hit enter again. So I'm going to show you some of the federal evaluation requirements. Please hit enter again. So a screen should have popped up. Starts off section 300.302. Screening for instructional purposes is not evaluation. Okay? All right. So that's what I was talking about, the DRA2 and the DIBELS. Those are screenings. The only thing they can determine at best is that your child may be at risk for a reading problem, okay, or a math problem, but it doesn't go in depth, and it's just at risk. And it depends on who's giving them the test, because those screenings, depending on it depends on who's given the test and who's scoring it. One teacher could give it to him and he passes. Another teacher gives them to him and he'll be at risk. That's why it's called a screening. It's too iffy. Okay, so if you go on, please hit enter again. This is where you can find all of these regulations. Okay, if you click on that link, it'll take you right to these regulations. Okay, you click on each one of them. So if you're asking for an evaluation, you click on 300.304, evaluation procedures. They have to do everything under that. Everything that it says in there, they have to do for your kid. They have to do it all. Okay, if your child has already been evaluated and you want your kid evaluated, say every 3 years, if your child's on an IEP, every 3 years they have to evaluate your kid, unless the school and the parent want to do it early. That's called a reevaluation, and you just do it early. Okay, so you put that in writing, you tell them I want to do it early, and they'll do it. Determining the existence of a specific learning disability. So there's a lot of kids that have dyslexia, for instance. That would be the thing that they would use. So if you wanted to find out what the district had to do regarding a specific learning disability, such as dyslexia, then you could go on to that link and find out what they were supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. This whole thing tells you exactly what the process is and why you need it why it needs to be done a certain way. Well, not so much why, but this is what the school district is obligated to do. And this is the way they're obligated to do it. It doesn't matter what they say. They're not telling you the truth. 9 times out of 10, if they say it's black, it's definitely white. It's definitely white. And they have all kinds of things like the word typically. As soon as the school district uses the word typically, as it relates to your child getting evaluations or getting services or whatever, as soon as they say typically, okay, something's wrong. The hairs on the back of your neck should stand straight up. If they talk about, well, the school district has a third option, no, you don't. No. You have 2 options. You either approve it or refuse it. There's no third option. There's no third option, and there's no exception to the rule. Okay, you guys have to follow the rules. Just like you want my child to follow the rules in your school, you have to follow the rules of the federal government. Or be in noncompliance. Just like my child, if he doesn't follow the rules, there's consequences. There are consequences for your actions. So, these are the rules. This is what they have to do. Okay? Your job is to make sure they're doing it that way, not their way, not their interpretation of. And you're going to see a lot of that. And you're going to go there. And you're going to hand them stuff. And you're going to say, no, here you go. That's not what the law says. That's what you want the law to say. That's not what the law says. Okay? Please hit enter. So, I know there's a lot of parents out there that you guys just want to rely on the determination of the school district because, I mean, I'm from that generation. If the school says that this is the way it is, that's what we believed. But a lot of things have happened over the 30 years or so that have passed regarding children with special needs. A lot of things have happened. A lot of laws have been passed. So it's not like it used to be. And there's a reason for the change because there were children that just weren't getting educated, and they weren't getting educated because they had a disability, and it's not fair. We live in the 21st century. There's so many things that are available to people that have disabilities that they can overcome some of the barriers, but we at least got to give them an opportunity. And sometimes relying on the school district is not your best answer. It's just not. You have to rely on yourself. And what I found is, I used to believe that it had to do with money, that it all had to do with money, and I've changed my mind. It's not. It's two things. It's their egos, for sure, and money. And the ego part always comes first. They don't like to be challenged. They don't like to be questioned. That's too bad. That's why we live in America. Okay? We have that right in America to challenge authority. We have that right. So challenge them. They're not any better than you. Believe me, they're not. They think they are. They want you to believe that they are better than you. They're not. I'm telling you, some of them, I don't even know how they got the positions that they have. I don't know how they got the titles they have. I don't even know how they got out of college. Honest to God, I just don't even understand it. Apparently, anybody can go to college. You don't have to even do any work. You just get a degree. Because the people that I've met in some of these schools, they're not trained or they're not applying any of the things that they learned in their particular field. They're not applying them in the education field. And I mean, it's easy. It's easy to see. I've been questioned just because I didn't go to college. I've been questioned as to what my credentials are. Here's my credentials. I have a high school diploma and 2 years in business. Everything else that I know, I learned on my own about special education. I knew about the laws. I know about what the school district's supposed to do. I know how they got the money. I know who gave them the money. I know what they're supposed to do with the money. I know what their licensing requires them to do. I know what the state agencies are supposed to do. All I need to know is what you're supposed to do. I don't need to know how to actually do it. I just need to know what you're supposed to do. And that's what you need to know as a parent. What are these individuals supposed to know what to do? What are they supposed to know? And how are they supposed to do it? That's all you need to know. Once you know what their job is, you're good. Then you can question them on any kind of level. And if they don't like it, that's too bad. Nobody cares. You're not there to be their friend. You don't have to go there and be antagonistic. And you don't have to be confrontational, but you've got to stand your ground. And sometimes standing your ground is taken as being confrontational because these people are not used to being challenged or questioned on anything that they do. I see it every day. It's amazing to me how they think they can say whatever they want and nobody's going to question their actions. They're nuts. They're completely nuts. I question everybody. I'm so happy I live in America. Just because I live in America, I'm not going to agree with everything, but I know this. We live in America, and in America, you can challenge authority. And just because some teacher in some school says it's so, doesn't mean it is so. They have clearly established rules, regulations, and laws that protect students with disabilities from them. That in of itself should say it all to you. We have to have laws in this country, federal, just to educate children with disabilities. That's a shame. That's really bad. Their job is to comply with all of the federal requirements and not to create school policies, procedures, and or practices that restrict, limit, condition the federal laws that only serve to benefit the district. They can't create addendums. No, they can't do it. Typically, no. We have a third option. No. If it's not in the law, you don't have it and you can't do it. You always have rights, procedural safeguards. Every time you go to a meeting, you say, where are my procedural safeguards? Where am I? Just let it fall out of your mouth. Make them give it to you. Make them give it to you. If they don't give it to you when you go home, you send them an email and say, I didn't get my procedural safeguards. That's a big no-no. Big. Please hit enter. Big no-no. Okay. I'm going to tell you about the cookie cutter approach to the evaluation procedures that school districts like to do. Okay. Hit enter again. And hit it again. There you go. Psychoeducational. IQ testing. Broad scores in reading, comprehension, and math. Yeah. That just tells you you'll get the WISC-4 or the Stanford Binet. They'll tell you what your kid's IQ score is. Sometimes they don't even tell you that. Oh, we couldn't do it. You couldn't do it? Why couldn't you test my kid to get his IQ? You can't. So if you can't do that, then how do you know what these other? So what do these other scores mean then? You say my kid is average, and I'm telling you, I've seen them. I've seen psych evals that are like the WISC-4, in which they tell me they can't give me the kid's IQ score. But they can give me the scores for for reading and reading comprehension and math. But you couldn't give me the scores for the IQ test? How is that possible? It's not. Just so you guys know, it's not possible. If they can give me the scores for this, they can give me the IQ score. Okay? Because that equals the IQ score. All right? But that's their cookie cutter approach. Just do a psychological. It doesn't even include academic testing. 9 times out of 10, they won't even do it. I had a kid that they didn't even do academic testing on the kid, which was amazing. So the only thing they did was the WISC-4, which was stupid. All by itself, it's stupid. You got to do it all. IQ doesn't tell me anything other than this is my kid's IQ. Across the nation, this is where he scored with the average. This is where he was with the average kids. That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell me if my kid's good in math or not. It doesn't tell me if my kid has dyslexia. It doesn't tell me if my kid has autism or social emotional problems or behavior. It doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me his IQ. That's their idea of testing. Yeah, no. That's not in all areas of suspected disability. It's called a cookie cutter approach. Okay? It's not good. You want a psychological, when they call it a psychological, ask them social, emotional, behavioral. Is that what you're including? Okay? Ask them. And if they don't have it on there, write it on the form. Social, emotional, behavioral. Okay? Please hit enter. Like I said, the IQ testing tells the parents where their child is in relationship to the average student across the United States. So the IQ testing has established what the norm is. Okay? For a kid that's 12 years old. What should that kid know at 12 years old, according to this IQ test or any IQ test that's valid and reliable and technically sound? They've established what the norm is. The average child IQ should be this much. Okay? The psychoeducational are broad scores. The educational piece is like broad scores. They don't tell you or pinpoint where the issue may be with your child. So when you get these scores, they might say that your kid is average in all of these areas. But you know and I know maybe not so much. And there's a reason why, and one day we'll get into that, how they come up with their scoring. You're going to die when you find out. But the scoring is basic math. And if they leave one of the test scores out for one of the subtests is a bunch of tests done, and then they add them up, and then they average out the score, which is divided by the number of subtests that they did. And that's how they come up with that. So if you have high scores and you have one that's, a 60, when you add it up, it's still going to come up to an average IQ score or an average where the child should be in that area. That child will be deemed average. But you'll see all these low scores, or you'll see scatter all over the place. If your kid is average, your kid should have like 80s all the way down, or 80s and 90s, and the numbers should be closely together. If you have a 75 in one area of a subtest, and you have an 89 in another subtest, and you have a 93 in another subtest, those scores are all over the place. There's major issues going on. And when you see scores that are like that, you need additional testing done. Okay? And one day we'll talk about that to bring it more clear. But what broad scores do is they do not pinpoint any specific deficits within a particular category of academics or testing. Okay? Educational testing. Please hit enter. The WISC versus the WIAT. Okay? This will give you some information on the intelligence testing versus academic testing. The WISC is the intelligence testing. The WIAT, and as I'm hitting this, I keep hitting the enter button, and both of these are popping up. The WIAT is academics, and it's 16 subtests, and it's oral reading, math fluency, early reading skills, enriched listening. The WISC is assessment of fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. See the difference in the testing instruments and what they're measuring? So that's the difference between the WISC and getting broad scores, and the difference in the WIAT 3 on specific areas of academics. Okay, so that's the difference right there. And it gets even more defined than that. But that gives you a rough idea of what they're looking at. I mean, they're talking about mazes and object assembly and picture arrangement, They're talking about this is what they used to have in it: information, word reasoning, picture completion. They still have these kinds of things in there, but as you can see, this is different from um, reading eligibility. I'm sorry, it's different from oral reading, math fluency, and early reading skills, listening comprehension, oral expression, and written expression subtests. That's specific to education. Okay, so that's it still isn't making a lot of sense, but it gives you an idea of what the tests do. Okay, what's the difference between the two tests? Um, and you can bring them together. So because whatever's showing up on the WISC, if you're getting low scores in specific areas, 9 times out of 10 you'll get those low scores on in that same area in the Wyatt 3. Okay, and a lot of tests support each other, and we'll get into that at a later date. But I can show you how they support each other. Even though they're completely different tests and testing in different areas. Like if you do achievement testing and then you do a speech and language assessment, you'll see some of the speech and language issues popping up, let's say on oral expression or um, written expression, because that's all in how you oral expression and receiving information and how you express yourself, using words to express yourself. That's part of speech and language. How do you express yourself? You know how you say to your kids, use your words. What if the kid doesn't have any words to use? That's speech and language. So if the kid doesn't have in their word repertoire, they don't have those words to use to calm themselves down, then guess what? They're not going to calm themselves down. And it'll be supported in the Wyatt 3. That the speech and language, so the speech and language eval and the Wyatt 3 may match in some areas to support each other. Okay, please hit enter. Okay, so I've provided some links and references that you can use to get more information. Please hit enter. SpedAnswers.com. I have a lot of training stuff and information on my website that you can check out. And my services. I'm really cheap, and my services are there, and it breaks it down so that you don't have to purchase a whole lot of stuff. You don't have to purchase advocacy per se. You can break it down in different sections, and it's kind of cool. So it helps parents out in how they're addressing special education and their child to get the services that they need. So check out that website. That's a link. SPED Q&A chat. What I usually do is a monthly, and I've gotten off track, but I do a monthly SPED Q&A chat where if you're a member of that Facebook page, then you can post a question related to special education, and I'll answer you. It's not like a regular Facebook page where everybody just jumps into the conversation. You ask me a question, I tell you exactly what to do. I tell you what information I'm relying on to help you to get it done. So you'll know exactly what to do and how to do it. Okay? Ideas Advocacy, that's also a Facebook page where you can get some information on that page about what I do and how I do it, and information regarding what's going on with special education. And then there's IDEA. That's the website where you can get all of the regulations. If you follow that link, it'll take you right to that webpage. So you can find out what you need to do. And one day I'm going to do a whole thing on how to search on that website. Okay? And then there's the information on the WISC-4 and the Wyatt 3. And if you follow that link, it'll take you to what's called PearsonClinical.com. That's where everybody has to buy those assessments. And it's a really cool website because they have samples of each test on what it looks like, or what it should look like after they get done. And it gives you samples of what it looks like. So it's really cool. So if you use that link, you'll have a good idea of what and how it works. So you can you have a preview of what it's supposed to look like. And then you can actually derive questions from your evaluation based on the sample that you have. You can ask them, how come you didn't do that? And they'll look at you, how did you know that? PearsonClinical.com. That's what you tell them. Okay? Please hit enter. And hit enter again. Like I said, my name is Tammy Joya, and I'm an advocate. And you can visit me at SpedAnswers.com. I also have an open chat forum that you can click on and ask me questions and stuff. Or you can reach me at spedissues@yahoo.com. And please hit enter. I just want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to provide you with this information, and just stay strong and be confident. And when all else fails, bluff. If you know anything about poker, that's how you have to have a poker face, and you have to pretend you're strong even though you're not. And I'm telling you, if you have a question, I will help you. I will back you 100%. If you're wrong, I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. But if you're right, and 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, you're right. You just don't know how to prove you're right. I can show you. I can prove that you're right. You just get in contact with me. Like I said, check out spedanswers.com. I want to thank you again and have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.